Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a review of the Tamron 50-300mm f4.5-6.3 lens. Now, I need to look at my paper because I have a lot of words here. It is a Di3 VC VXD lens. That's a lot of stuff, and we will unpack that throughout this review, but I do want to get one thing out of the way first. This is one of those consumer type lenses. Think someone who wants to photograph their kids running around, playing sports in the backyard, and they just want pictures so they can share them with the world. They are not looking to be professional photographers, because I do not recommend this lens for people that are aspiring to be professional photographers. It's a lens for people who just want to reach out and grab some photos and be able to shoot a little bit wider at 50. Now, before we get into all the details, what did I photograph? Well, being that this is more of a consumer type lens, I went and photographed Little League Baseball. And by Little League Baseball, I mean the Philadelphia Phillies, and they hit home runs, and they're not little leaguers by any stretch of the imagination, but if it can do well in that situation, it can do well in your situation. Now let's take a look at the lens itself. It is a pretty compact, basically good feeling lens. It's not too light, doesn't feel super cheap, and it's not feeling like a big metal lens. It feels fine. This is your lens hood for anybody just starting out. Always keep the lens hood on when you're shooting. That means this: you put it on there, you put it out at the end. It's not just for knocking it on things in case you bounce it off of something, but it also, what it does is it cuts down on light hitting the lens, basically acting as a natural shade. That's why it's called a lens hood. And when you're not using it, you take it off and you put it back like this. But don't be the person that leaves it like this when they're shooting, because you really can't, because it's hard to zoom if you turn it this way. So we're gonna put that off there right now. This is your lens cap, this is your zoom ring, this is 50, and this is 300. Now this is what they call an external zooming lens, meaning as you zoom, the lens moves and protrudes out just like that. There is a lock switch on the side of it. When you put that lock on, you cannot zoom this lens at all. So if you're going to be traveling or you're going to be hanging it off your neck or something, this shouldn't really have lens creep, which is where the lens just zooms on its own. So I'm not sure why you need to lock it at all, but they do have that lock there. You do have one custom function button built in here that will tie in with whatever camera you decide that you are using. I was using the Sony a7 IV when I went and photographed baseball, but it's going to be an E-mount lens, which means you can use it on any of the Sony bodies. And that is basically the outside of the lens. It's a very basic consumer type of lens. Now what it does have is called VC, which is vibration compensation, which helps you in lower light situations to stabilize the shot that you're trying to shoot and shoot at slower shutter speeds. Now keep in mind, if you shoot a slow shutter speed and you're trying to shoot sports and the subject moves across the frame, it's not going to help keep them stable, but it will keep that background nice and focused because it's not moving. Now, I bring up VC because you will hear a jiggle, and my money doesn't fold, it jiggles. Don't be afraid of that. That is natural. That is what the lens is supposed to do. Now, when it's connected to a body, the power goes to it and that VC kicks in, and you don't have to worry about the jiggle because it'll be like, psh, it locks it into place. So that is normal. Your lens is not broken. This lens is what's called a variable aperture lens, meaning at 50 millimeters, the aperture is 4.5. As you zoom out, the aperture goes to 6.3. That means you are losing light as you zoom, and you have to compensate for the loss of light. The aperture goes from, say, 4.5, and as you zoom out, it's closing down, cutting back on the amount of light coming in. For example, we've got this photo right here of Cole Hamels. This one is at 50 millimeters, which means he's at 4.5, and when we go in all the way to 300 millimeters, it goes to 6.3, but none of the other settings were changed because I was in full manual. So you see how much darker the one is as you zoom in because you're cutting down on the amount of light. Now, if you do want to get a fixed aperture lens, Tamron has a 70-180 and it's a 2.8. It's not as long as this. So just keep in mind, you're going to have to compensate for that. Or if you're shooting in auto, the camera will do all of the work for you to make sure you have the proper exposure. Now, remember when I mentioned VXD? So what does that stand for? It stands for for voice coil extreme torque drive. So that's the type of autofocus that it's doing. And in the real world situations, here's a play at home plate where Alec Boehm was running around third ever so slowly, and that's why he got thrown out at the plate. But the autofocus tracked really well, and you can see that the catcher is nice and in focus, and that is a good sign. So this is a okay focusing lens. A lot depends on what camera you end up putting it on, as some of the systems focus faster, or some of Sony's cameras will focus faster than the other, but it did a very nice job, much better than way back in the day with the super slow lenses that would have to hunt when you went all the way in and all the way out. These are absolutely much faster when it comes to autofocus. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you this photo taken with the 50-300mm and edited with our presets from F4.5 4, starting with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn, C41, Copper Tone, DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, Tintype, and Wet Hot American Summer. But my all-time favorite from F4.5 1 with one click is Skittles. And boom, look how good that looks. But check this out, exclusive and all new to F4.5 4 are X1, X2, X3, and X4, which are adaptive presets. I'm gonna hit X3 to go ahead and bring his eyes back. Go up here, iris is already selected, and watch what happens. We can make the eyes pop even more. We don't wanna go that far. We wanna keep it subtle so it looks natural, but that's with the eye auto selected. That's off, that's on. It looks so much better. So look, if you want to speed up your raw workflow or give yourself a great starting point, or you're just tired of other people's presets just sucking, we created 14 all new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at froknosphoto.com/F4.5 4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you want to get the Grand Slam bundle that includes F4.5 1, which has Skittles in it, F4.5 2, 3, and 4, you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, if you're wondering how many aperture blades this lens has, this one has 9. Now, I do want to talk about Tamron having a 70-300mm lens, which is less expensive than this, but it doesn't have the same focusing motors. It doesn't have the VC. It's a 70-300, whereas this one is a 50-300, and it's a couple of $100 less than this one. You have to decide for yourself which might be the right one for you, but with the newer one, you are getting a lot more for that extra money because of the better focusing and the image stabilization, or as they call it, VC. There's a 67mm filter thread on the front of this lens. I do not recommend putting any clear or UV filters on here. If someone at the camera store tries to sell that to you, I would probably say don't buy it. The only types of filters you would want to use at some point might be a polarizer or a neutral density, but for this lens, you do not need to put anything in front of it. You don't need to do it. The lenses are perfectly fine. Just don't scratch them up, don't get a lot of dust on them, clean them properly, and you'll be happy with them for many, many years. Now, if you like to get close to your subjects, there is a close focusing range where if you get too close, it will not autofocus. At the wider end of this lens, which is the 50, you can get within 8.7 inches to get focus and 35.4 inches when you're zoomed out to 300mm. But let's take a look at some of the photos I was able to capture. Here, I just want to demonstrate for you when I'm in the first base dugout side where I have a great position to shoot home plate. We got Nick Castellanos who just hit the ball into the outfield here. I'm able to track him. The focus looks good. The colors are as expected. The lens does what you expect it to do. It's not going to set the world on fire as the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's going to get the job done. And if it can do it here, then it can do it in Little League in your hands. So keep that in mind. But what I want to show you is, being that I'm at 6.3, look at the background. He's pretty far from the background as he's running up the first baseline, and so it dissipates. It goes, that's what we call bokeh. It's the out of focus area. It looks okay, but if you got someone around home plate like this with Kyle Schwarber, who just hit a home run here, by the way, because he goes into a home run trot after he hits this, look how much more in focus the people in the background are. Even though I'm out at 300, He's further away than Nick Castellanos was, so that's why the subjects are much more in focus in the background. If I had a subject right in front of me and I focused on them, the background blow out even more. But if I move the subject further away and closer to that background, it's not going to be as blown out as what I just demonstrated. Let's look at another example of how the autofocus worked. There was a play going into second base, and right here we can see what 300mm gives us. As I zoom in on Braden Stott's face here, he's sharp. The guy sliding into second, he's sharp. You can see the ball in the glove, tapping the guy on the helmet, and with the next image, it shows you the umpire punching him out. I actually like this because you got the player running off the field, you got the dejected guy who just got thrown out, and you've got the umpire punching him out. That is a good storytelling image in this situation, but everything was nice and in focus there, so that is totally good. Again, this is what 50mm gives you. This is pre-game with Cole Hamels here. 50mm vertical. We zoom in, we get 300mm vertical. So you can see the nice range that you're capable of getting. Couple more sample images here. Let's get Bryce Harper over at first base. Right here, I'm only at 182mm. And that's why the Toyota sign and the WB Mason and the Giant all in the background, because we're at, what are we at? We're at f6.3 right here. Look how everything is basically in focus. There's a difference between a $12,000 lens, like I would shoot a 400-2.8 Sony lens out at the game. The background would be totally obliterated in this situation, versus using something like this that's a variable aperture. But there's a big difference between spending $12,000 and spending the cost of this lens, which is $800. Let me jump in here real quick and say, would you like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations? Well, if you said yes, just look for this orange box over on FroKnowsPhoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm going to send you that guide for free. Next up, I changed positions to what they call inside third base, which is an awesome place to watch a game from and shoot a game from. This gives me a clear shot at Bryce Harper at first. I locked off on him just in case a play would come to him, and this is 300mm. Not tight enough from where I was sitting, and so keep that in mind that if you're on a field and your kids are further away, 300 is a good range. You would get something like a 450mm equivalent on a crop sensor camera. So that's like the A6700 style camera. This would be a pretty good lens to give you a nice range on that. Now, before I compare this and tell you what I think you should do, there's two more tests that are very important here at Fronos Photo, and that is the sniff test and the wind tunnel test. We're gonna start with the sniff test. Let's smell it right here. Oh man, it smells like the Sandlot. Yeah, the Sandlot. That's right. Wind tunnel test, here we go. It moved, Steven. Steven, it moved. Failed the wind tunnel test. No good on the wind tunnel test. That shouldn't affect your buying, by the way. Let me tell you, there's a couple of other lenses you could think about. There is a 28-200 from Tamron. That is a 2.8-5.6 variable aperture lens. That is also $800 like this lens right here. The difference is you have that wider angle to just a little bit of telephoto out at 200. That's not going to be great for field sports or soccer or football or anything that you need to capture at a distance, but it is giving you the wider shot. So that's something to keep in mind. Then there's the 70-300 f4.5-6.3, which is $549, which I basically feel like this is replacing. Now, when I say budget lens in a title of a video, budget is of course relative. Now, budget as a zoom lens for $800 is pretty inexpensive in this day and age. These used to be like $350, $400 in the DSLR world, but they also weren't that good of lenses way back in the day. You have options as little as $540 some for a lens like the 70-300. I think this is slightly better than the 70-300 because of the autofocus and the vibration compensation, but if you're someone who just wants to reach out and touch things at a distance, maybe save the couple of $100. But that's for you to decide. I can't tell you what you should be able to buy. I'm just guiding you that 50-300 is a very nice range. 70-300 is a good range, but this lens is going to be better, and that's why it costs a little bit more. So that's all I have to say about this lens. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.